I never thought 3 chickens would turn my quiet life in Scottsdale, Arizona upside down. But here I was, standing on my front porch at 7 in the morning, staring at a woman whose face had gone tomato red while she waved a printed copy of HOA bylaws in my face like it was the Declaration of Independence. "Mr. Graham, do you understand that your illegal livestock operation is in direct violation of Section 12, subsection 4 of the Desert Vista Homeowners Association rules?" The woman, who had introduced herself as Patricia Hendricks, HOA president, practically spat the words at me. I rubbed my eyes, still groggy from being woken up by her aggressive doorbell ringing. "Madam, they're 3 hens, not livestock. They're pets that happen to lay eggs." "Pets?" Patricia's voice hit a pitch that probably disturbed dogs 3 blocks away. "Pets do not produce agricultural products, Mr. Graham. This is a residential neighborhood, not a farm." I glanced behind me where Nugget, Henrietta, and Cluckles were peacefully pecking around in their small coop in my backyard. My property was a corner lot with a decent-sized yard, and I had built the coop myself 2 months ago, making sure it was clean, attractive, and tucked away from the main view of the street. The chickens were quiet, well cared for, and honestly, they had become my favorite part of moving to this cookie-cutter suburban hellscape after my divorce. "Look, Mrs. Hendricks, I actually checked the bylaws before I got the chickens. There's nothing in there that specifically prohibits poultry. I've got the document right here if you want to see it." I pulled out my phone, but Patricia was already shaking her head so vigorously I worried about her neck. "The spirit of the law is clear, Mr. Graham. We maintain certain standards in Desert Vista Estates. Standards that keep property values high and maintain the aesthetic quality our residents expect. Your chicken coop is an eyesore and your birds are noisy." That was rich. Noisy. They're hens. They barely make any sound. "Unlike your yappy little dog that barks at falling leaves every night at 3 a.m. Patricia's eyes narrowed dangerously. "That is completely different. Mr. Whiskers is a recognized household pet. Your barnyard animals are not. Mr. Whiskers is a dog, right? Not a cat." "That is none of your concern." I pinched the bridge of my nose. "Mrs. Hendricks, respectfully, unless you can show me exactly where in the HOA rules it says I cannot keep chickens, they're staying. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have to get ready for work." "This isn't over, Mr. Graham," she shouted as I closed the door. Through the window, I watched her stomp back to her white Lexus, which she had parked directly in front of my mailbox, probably deliberately. "My name is Owen Graham. I'm 42 years old, and I work as a software engineer for a tech company based out of Phoenix." The divorce from my ex-wife, Sarah, had been finalized 8 months ago, and I had moved to Desert Vista Estates looking for a fresh start. The subdivision was nice enough, one of those planned communities with Spanish-style homes, manicured lawns, and apparently an HOA president with too much time on her hands. The chicken idea had come from my daughter, Emma, who was 16 and living with her mother in Temp most of the time. She had been worried about me living alone, eating poorly, not taking care of myself. Getting chickens had been her suggestion after she read some article about pet therapy and sustainable living. I had researched it, found that Scottsdale city ordinances actually allowed up to 6 hens in residential areas, and nowhere in the HOA documents could I find a prohibition. So I went for it. That first morning confrontation with Patricia was just the beginning. Over the next week, I received 3 official-looking letters from the HOA, each more threatening than the last. The first requested I remove the chickens voluntarily. The second informed me of a $100 fine. The third threatened legal action and daily compounding fines of $50. I ignored them all and documented everything. I also started researching HOA law in Arizona, which turned out to be a rabbit hole of bureaucratic nonsense. But one thing was clear. HOAs had to follow their own bylaws, and they couldn't enforce rules that didn't exist. On a Saturday morning, 2 weeks after Patricia's first visit, I was in the backyard with Emma, who was spending the weekend with me. We were collecting eggs from the coop when I heard voices from the front yard. Not just voices, multiple voices, angry voices. "Stay here," I told Emma, heading around the side of the house. In my front yard stood Patricia, along with 3 other people I recognized as neighbors. Robert Chen from 2 houses down, Margaret Powell, who lived directly across from me, and a thin man in an expensive suit I didn't recognize. "Mr. Graham," Patricia called out when she saw me. "This is Gerald Finch, the attorney for Desert Vista Estates HOA. We're here to conduct an inspection of your property." Gerald Finch stepped forward, extending a hand which I did not shake. "Mr. Graham, I'm advising you that the HOA board has voted to classify your chicken coop as an unauthorized structure. We're here to document it for our lawsuit." "Lawsuit?" I laughed. "Over 3 chickens that aren't violating any actual rules." Margaret Powell spoke up then. She was in her early 50s, usually friendly when I saw her at the mailbox. "Owen, it's not just about the rules. It's about the smell and the noise. My property value is going to drop because of your farm animals." "Margaret, have you actually smelled anything from my yard, or heard anything?" She hesitated. "Well, no, but it's only a matter of time before nothing," I interrupted. "You're making up hypothetical problems." Robert Chen cleared his throat. "The HOA board has a responsibility to all residents. We need uniformity. If we let you keep chickens, next thing someone will want goats or pigs." "That's a slippery slope fallacy," I pointed out. "And besides, the city allows chickens. You can't make up rules that contradict city ordinances." Gerald Finch smiled, and it wasn't a pleasant expression. "Actually, Mr. Graham, HOAs can impose restrictions that are more stringent than city ordinances, and we're prepared to argue that your livestock keeping falls under our general nuisance clause." "Show me." He pulled out a document. Section 18, subsection 7. No resident shall engage in any activity that creates a nuisance, disturbance, or reduction in quality of life for other residents. Your agricultural operation qualifies. 3 hens pecking around in a clean coop is not a nuisance. You're grasping at straws. Patricia stepped forward, her face already flushing red. "Mr. Graham, you are being obstinate and disrespectful to this community's values. We will not tolerate your flagrant disregard for Dad." Emma had come around the corner, holding a small basket with 3 brown eggs in it. "Is everything okay?" Patricia's expression changed instantly, morphing into something I suppose she thought was friendly but looked more like a wolf baring its teeth. "Oh, hello, dear. You must be Mr. Graham's daughter. Perhaps you can talk some sense into your father about his inappropriate farming activities." Emma looked at the eggs in her basket, then at Patricia. "These chickens were my idea, actually. Dad was really lonely after the divorce, and studies show that taking care of animals can help with depression and anxiety. The chickens give him a routine and a purpose. Plus, the eggs are amazing." I felt a surge of pride at my daughter's composure, but also worry. I didn't want her dragged into this mess. Gerald Finch, however, seized on her words. "So you admit these are egg-producing animals, agricultural in nature?" "They're pets that produce eggs," Emma said calmly, "like how some people's pets have babies that they sell. That doesn't make them commercial breeders." "That's different," Patricia snapped, her friendly facade cracking immediately. "How?" Emma challenged. "We're not here to debate with children," Patricia said dismissively. "Mr. Graham, you have until the end of the month to remove the chickens, or we will pursue a lawsuit and place a lien on your property. Good day." They left in a convoy of self-righteous indignation, Gerald Finch's silver Mercedes leading the way. Emma looked up at me. "They can't actually do that, can they? Honestly, I don't know, but I'm going to find out." That evening, after Emma had gone home to her mother's place, I sat down and started making calls. I contacted 3 different attorneys who specialized in HOA disputes. The first 2 wanted retainers of $5,000 just to start. The third, a woman named Jennifer Santos, offered to consult for free after I explained the situation. "Mr. Graham, Arizona is actually one of the more homeowner-friendly states when it comes to HOA disputes," Jennifer explained over the phone. "The key thing here is that they're trying to apply a vague nuisance clause to something that isn't actually causing a nuisance." "Do you have any documentation of the chickens not causing problems?" "Like what?" "Photos, videos, maybe statements from neighbors who don't have issues with them." I thought about it. "My next-door neighbor, Tom, he's actually asked about getting some eggs. And the family behind me, the Johnsons, their kids love coming over to see the chickens." "Perfect. Get statements from them if you can. Also, start documenting everything the HOA sends you. Every letter, every email, every fine notice. And whatever you do, don't pay any fines. That could be seen as an admission of guilt." "What are my actual chances here if they sue?" Jennifer was quiet for a moment. "Honestly, it's probably 60-40 in your favor. The problem is that even if you win, litigation is expensive and time-consuming. The HOA is using the association's money, so they don't care about costs. You'd be paying out of pocket. So they're counting on me backing down because I can't afford to fight." "Exactly. It's a common HOA tactic. They bully people into compliance through the threat of legal fees." After I hung up with Jennifer, I sat in my kitchen, staring out the window at the coop. The chickens were settling in for the night, making soft, contented sounds. The whole situation was ridiculous. 3 birds had somehow become the center of a neighborhood drama, but I wasn't going to back down. Not this time. I had spent too much of my marriage compromising, keeping quiet, avoiding conflict. That's partly why Sarah left. She said I never stood up for what I wanted. Well, I wanted these chickens. And more than that, I didn't want to let Patricia Hendricks think she could push people around. The next morning, Sunday, I went door to door in my section of the neighborhood. Tom Gardner, my next-door neighbor, was happy to provide a written statement saying the chickens caused him no problems, and that he actually enjoyed hearing their quiet clucking. The Johnsons, the family behind me, signed a statement, and their 2 kids drew pictures of the chickens. By the end of the day, I had positive statements from 8 households. I also encountered resistance. 3 families told me they supported the HOA's position, though when I pressed them on whether they had personally experienced any problems with my chickens, none could cite anything specific. They just felt chickens didn't belong in the neighborhood. Monday morning, I sent all the documentation to Jennifer Santos, along with photos of my well-maintained coop and yard. I also filed a formal response with the HOA, denying their allegations and requesting an in-person hearing before the board. The hearing was scheduled for the following Thursday evening at the community center. I spent the week preparing, printing out Arizona state laws regarding urban chicken keeping, City of Scottsdale ordinances, and the HOA's own bylaws with the relevant sections highlighted. Thursday evening, I arrived at the community center at 6:30 for the 7 p.m. hearing. The parking lot was surprisingly full. When I walked into the meeting room, I understood why. At least 40 people from the neighborhood were there, which was unusual for a typical HOA board meeting. Patricia sat at the head table with 4 other board members. She smiled when she saw me, but it was the smile of a cat that had cornered a mouse. "Good evening, Mr. Graham. I see you've decided to attend. Wouldn't miss it." The meeting was called to order, and after some preliminary business about landscaping and pool maintenance, my case was called. "We now address the matter of 4258 Desert Vista Drive and the violation of association standards," Patricia announced. "Mr. Owen Graham has been keeping livestock on his property in violation of our community standards and nuisance clauses. The board has voted to fine Mr. Graham and require immediate removal of said livestock. Mr. Graham has requested this hearing to appeal." "Mr. Graham, you have 10 minutes. I stood up, my folder of documentation in hand. "Thank you. First, I want to clarify that I'm keeping 3 hens, not livestock. According to the USDA's definition, livestock refers to animals raised for commercial purposes. My hens are pets that produce eggs for personal consumption. Second, the city of Scottsdale allows up to 6 hens in residential areas with proper coops. My coop meets all city requirements. Third, and most importantly, there is no specific prohibition against hens in the Desert Vista Estates HOA bylaws." "Section 18, subsection 7, Patricia interrupted. "Nuisance clause, which requires an actual nuisance to exist," I countered. "I have statements from 8 neighboring households confirming that my hens cause no noise, smell, or any other disturbance. I also have photos showing my coop is clean, well-maintained, and barely visible from the street." I walked up and handed copies of everything to the board members. Patricia barely glanced at hers. "Mr. Graham, the spirit of our community standards is clear. This is a high-end residential neighborhood, not a rural farming area. Chickens lower property values and create an agricultural atmosphere inconsistent with our community identity." "Do you have any evidence that property values have been affected?" I asked. "It's common sense," board member Robert Chen chimed in. "Common sense isn't evidence. I've done research, and there's actually a growing trend of urban chicken keeping that has shown no negative impact on property values. In some cases, it's increased them because buyers value sustainable living features." "That's absurd," Patricia said. Another board member, a quiet woman named Susan Torres, spoke up. "I actually think Mr. Graham might have a point. My sister in Colorado keeps chickens and her neighborhood is quite upscale. They haven't had any problems." Patricia shot Susan a look that could have melted steel. "We're not Colorado. But the principle is the same," Susan continued. "If there's no specific rule against it and no actual harm is being caused, can we really fine him? The nuisance clause gives us broad discretion," Gerald Finch, who was sitting in the audience, called out. I turned to face him. "Broad discretion doesn't mean unlimited discretion. You still need to demonstrate actual harm. You can't just declare something a nuisance because you don't personally like it." Patricia stood up, her face reddening. "Mr. Graham, you are disrupting the character of this community with your obstinate insistence on keeping farm animals. Multiple residents have complained. 3 residents have complained," I corrected, "out of a community of over 200 homes. And none of them have experienced any actual problems. They just don't like the idea of chickens." "That's enough." Patricia slammed her hand on the table. "The board will deliberate and provide our decision. This hearing is concluded." I stood there, frustrated. Don't I get my full 10 minutes? "You've said your piece. We'll be in touch." The board members filed into a back room. The audience, which had been mostly silent during the exchange, erupted into conversation. I was surprised when several people came up to me. A woman I didn't recognize introduced herself as Linda Morrison from 3 streets over. "I think what you're doing is great. I've actually been thinking about getting chickens myself, but was afraid the HOA would come after me. If you win this, would you help me set up a coop?" "Sure," I said, though winning felt far from certain. Tom Gardner clapped me on the shoulder. "You did good, Owen. Patricia's had it coming for a while. She thinks she runs this place like her own kingdom." More people approached with similar sentiments. It turned out, Patricia had made plenty of enemies over the years, with her aggressive enforcement of minor infractions. One man, Stephen, told me he had been fined $500 because his garbage can was visible from the street on a non-pickup day, even though he had been loading his car for a trip and had brought it out temporarily. A woman named Carol had been cited for having the wrong shade of white paint on her front door. I was starting to realize this wasn't really about chickens. It was about Patricia's need for control and the community's growing resentment of her authoritarian approach. 20 minutes later, the board members returned. Patricia's expression told me everything I needed to know before she even spoke. "The board has voted 3-2 to uphold the violation notice and fine. Mr. Graham, you have 2 weeks to remove the chickens from your property. Your current fine of $100 stands, with additional daily fines of $50 beginning if the chickens are not removed by the deadline. You have the right to appeal this decision through the formal appeals process outlined in Section 23 of the HOA bylaws. This meeting is adjourned." I drove home angry but not defeated. The 2-week deadline gave me time to escalate this properly. That night, I officially hired Jennifer Santos to represent me and filed an appeal with the HOA's Dispute Resolution Committee, which was apparently separate from the board itself. The next few days were tense. I received a formal letter from the HOA restating the decision and the deadline. I also received something unexpected: a petition signed by over 50 households in the neighborhood supporting my right to keep chickens. Linda Morrison had organized it after the meeting, going door to door and gathering signatures. When I thanked her over the phone, she laughed. "Owen, you've given people a reason to push back against Patricia's nonsense. We're all tired of being treated like children who can't make our own decisions about our own properties." The appeal hearing was scheduled for 2 weeks out, which was cutting it close to the removal deadline. Jennifer advised me to keep detailed records of everything and to not remove the chickens under any circumstances. "If you comply now, it weakens your position," she explained. "We need to show you're serious about fighting this." In the meantime, something interesting started happening. People began stopping by my house to see the chickens. Families with kids would walk by and ask if they could look at them. I started giving tours of the coop, explaining how I maintained it and showing off how clean and quiet the hens were. One afternoon, Margaret Powell, the woman who had been at my house with Patricia during the inspection threat, knocked on my door. "Owen, I owe you an apology," she said. "Patricia convinced me that chickens would be a problem, but I've been watching and honestly, I can't see any issues. Your yard is actually nicer than mine, and my grandson loved getting to see the chickens yesterday when we walked by. Thank you, Margaret. That means a lot." I signed Linda's petition. I know I was one of the people who initially complained, but I was wrong. Patricia can be very persuasive when she wants to be. Margaret wasn't the only one. Over the next week, 2 other people who had initially supported the HOA's position changed their minds after actually seeing the chickens and coop in person. It turned out that fear of the unknown was Patricia's greatest weapon, and exposure to the reality was my best defense. The weekend before my appeal hearing, Emma came to stay with me again. We were in the kitchen making breakfast with fresh eggs when she asked the question I had been dreading. "Dad, what happens if you lose the appeal? Will you really have to get rid of Nugget, Henrietta, and Cluckles?" I flipped a beautifully golden fried egg. "I don't know, Em. I might have to move them somewhere else, maybe to a farm outside the city. But you love them, and they help you." "I know. This isn't fair. Those HOA people are just mean." I sat down across from her with our plates. Sometimes in life, people use whatever power they have to make themselves feel important. Patricia isn't a bad person, she's just scared. Scared of what? Of things changing. Of not being in control. Of people not following her rules. Emma stabbed at her egg thoughtfully. "When I'm older, I'm never living somewhere with an HOA. I couldn't help but laugh. That's probably smart." The appeal hearing was held on a Wednesday evening at the office of a mediation company in Phoenix. It was more formal than the board meeting. A neutral arbitrator named David Katz presided, with Jennifer Santos representing me and Gerald Finch representing the HOA. Patricia was there as the HOA president, along with Robert Chen as the vice president. David Katz opened the proceedings by reviewing the case documentation. "This is an appeal of a violation notice and fine issued by the Desert Vista Estates Homeowners Association to Mr. Owen Graham regarding the keeping of 3 hens on his property. Mr. Graham contends that there is no specific bylaw prohibiting hens and that the hens cause no actual nuisance. The HOA contends that the hens violate the spirit of the community standards and fall under the general nuisance clause. Is that an accurate summary?" Both sides agreed. Let's begin with the HOA's position. Gerald Finch presented his case, arguing that homeowners associations exist to maintain property values and community standards, and that allowing agricultural animals would set a dangerous precedent. He cited the nuisance clause repeatedly and claimed that even if there were no specific prohibition, the HOA board had the authority to make reasonable interpretations of the bylaws. Jennifer Santos countered by pointing out that HOA powers were limited by their own governing documents and that they could not enforce rules that did not exist. She presented the city ordinances allowing chickens, the positive neighbor statements, and photos showing the well-maintained property. "Mr. Katz, the HOA is essentially trying to create a new rule through retroactive enforcement," Jennifer argued. "If they want to prohibit chickens, they need to go through the proper process of amending the bylaws, which requires a vote of the entire membership. They cannot simply declare something prohibited because the current board president doesn't like it. The nuisance clause has always been part of our bylaws," Gerald Finch responded. "We're not creating anything new, we're enforcing existing standards." "But you have to demonstrate an actual nuisance," Jennifer shot back. "You can't just declare something a nuisance in the abstract. Where are the noise complaints, the smell complaints, the vermin problems? You have none of that because none of it exists. What you have is a board president with a personal vendetta." Patricia stood up, her face flushing. "This is not personal. This is about maintaining the integrity of our community." David Katz held up his hand. "Mrs. Hendricks, please remain seated. Miss Santos, do you have evidence that this is personal rather than a matter of policy?" Jennifer pulled out a document. "I have copies of the HOA board meeting minutes from the past 2 years. In that time, the board has issued violation notices for 23 different infractions. 17 of those notices were initiated by Mrs. Hendricks personally. Of those 17, 12 were against homeowners who had previously voted against her in HOA elections or had filed complaints about her own property. Mr. Graham is new to the community and has no history with Mrs. Hendricks, but his next-door neighbor, Tom Gardner, filed a complaint 6 months ago about Mrs. Hendricks's dog barking at night. Within 2 weeks of Mr. Graham and Mr. Gardner becoming friendly, Mrs. Hendricks initiated this violation notice. Gerald Finch looked uncomfortable. That's circumstantial and irrelevant to the specific question of whether chickens are allowed. It's relevant to the question of whether this enforcement action is being conducted in good faith, Jennifer countered. David Katz reviewed the documents silently for several minutes. The room was tense. I could see Patricia whispering urgently to Gerald Finch, who kept shaking his head. Finally, David Katz spoke. I'm prepared to issue my decision. After reviewing the evidence and arguments, I find that the Desert Vista Estates Homeowners Association has failed to demonstrate that Mr. Graham's hens constitute a nuisance under the plain language of Section 18, subsection 7. The nuisance clause requires an actual disturbance or reduction in quality of life, not a hypothetical or assumed problem. The HOA has presented no evidence of noise, smell, vermin, or any other tangible issue caused by the hens. Additionally, the HOA bylaws contain specific prohibitions for many things, but do not specifically mention poultry. Under the legal principle that HOA rules must be clear and unambiguous, I find that the HOA cannot enforce a prohibition that does not exist in the bylaws. The violation notice is hereby overturned and the fine is vacated. However, I want to be clear, Mr. Graham, that this decision is based on the current state of the bylaws. The HOA has the right to amend the bylaws through the proper process to prohibit chickens in the future. I felt a wave of relief wash over me. Jennifer squeezed my shoulder. Patricia stood up. This is outrageous. You're setting a precedent that will destroy our community. Mrs. Hendricks, the decision is final. If you disagree, you may pursue litigation, but I would advise you to consider the costs and likelihood of success before doing so. We left the mediation office in good spirits. Jennifer assured me that while the HOA could theoretically sue in court, David Katz's decision would carry significant weight, and most judges would be unlikely to overturn it. What about them changing the bylaws to prohibit chickens? I asked. That requires a vote of the full membership. Based on that petition Linda Morrison got signed, I don't think they'll have the votes. But even if they do eventually pass something, it won't be retroactive. You'd be grandfathered in. I thanked Jennifer profusely and paid her fee, which was substantial but worth every penny. When I got home, it was nearly 9 p.m. I went straight to the backyard to check on the chickens, who were roosting peacefully in their coop. We won, I told them. Henrietta made a soft chirping sound which I chose to interpret as congratulations. The next morning, I woke up to find my front yard decorated with balloons and a sign that read, "Congratulations, Owen." Tom Gardner and Linda Morrison were standing on my porch with a bottle of champagne and a basket of fresh vegetables from Linda's garden. "We heard the news," Linda said excitedly. "Margaret Powell called me last night. You did it." We celebrated on my front porch, which felt wonderfully defiant given that Patricia lived just 2 streets over and would probably hear about it. "So what happens now?" Tom asked. "Now we see if Patricia tries anything else," I said. "Jennifer thinks they might try to change the bylaws." "Let them try," Linda said with a grin. "I've already been talking to people. We're organizing. If they want to ban chickens, we're going to make sure other ridiculous rules get voted down at the same time." "What kind of rules?" Linda pulled out a list. "The paint color restrictions, the mailbox design requirements, the prohibition on vegetable gardens in front yards, the rule that you can't park in your own driveway for more than 2 hours during the day. People are fed up, Owen. You started something." Over the next few weeks, things settled into a new normal. I continued caring for my chickens, collecting eggs and documenting everything just in case. The HOA went quiet, sending no more letters or threats. Then something unexpected happened. About a month after the appeal decision, I found a note in my mailbox. It was from a woman named Rachel Turner who lived 4 streets over. The note said, "Mr. Graham, I heard about your fresh eggs. Would you be willing to sell me a dozen? I'll pay whatever you think is fair." I hadn't thought about selling eggs. I had more than I could use myself, usually giving the extras to Emma, Tom, or other neighbors who had supported me. But the idea intrigued me. I called the number on the note. Rachel Turner answered on the second ring. "Mrs. Turner, this is Owen Graham. I got your note about eggs." "Oh, wonderful. Yes, I've been trying to find fresh local eggs. The ones at the grocery store just aren't the same. I heard yours are amazing. I can definitely spare a dozen. How about $5? That seems too cheap. How about 8? We settled on $6 per dozen, and she came by that evening to pick them up. When I handed her the carton of eggs still warm from that day's collection, her face lit up. "These are beautiful. Look at those dark orange yolks through the shell. Thank you so much." Word spread quickly. Within a week, I had 5 regular customers. Within 2 weeks, 10. My 3 hens were producing about 2 dozen eggs per week, which wasn't enough to meet the demand. I started a waiting list. Emma found the whole thing hilarious when I told her about it during our weekend together. "Dad, you're running an actual egg business. Patricia's head is probably exploding." "It's not really a business. I'm just sharing eggs with neighbors." "You're taking money, that's a business." She had a point. I looked into the legalities of it. Arizona allowed the sale of eggs from small flocks without a license as long as you sold them directly from your property and didn't wholesale them. I was well within the rules. I invested in better feed, got nicer packaging, and even designed simple labels with Desert Vista fresh eggs printed on them. The chickens, well fed and happy, kept producing consistently. 2 months after I started selling eggs, I had 20 regular customers and a waiting list of 15 more. I was making about $200 a month, which wasn't life-changing but was nice supplemental income. More importantly, it was fun. People would stop by, chat about the chickens, share recipes, and generally be neighborly. My corner of Desert Vista Estates had become a little hub of community activity. That's when Patricia showed up at my door again. It was a Saturday morning, and I had several customers coming by for their weekly egg pickups. Patricia marched up my driveway, her face its familiar shade of red. "Mr. Graham, you are operating an illegal business out of your home." I was getting eggs from the coop and didn't even look up. "Good morning, Patricia." "No, I'm not. I'm selling eggs from my personal chickens directly from my property, which is completely legal under Arizona law. This is a residential neighborhood, not a commercial district. You're violating zoning laws. Actually, cottage food laws and urban agriculture exemptions allow exactly what I'm doing. I checked with the city. You're creating traffic. All these people coming and going, it's disturbing the peace." I finally turned to look at her. A car was pulling up, one of my regular customers arriving for their weekly dozen. "Patricia, are you really arguing that a few neighbors stopping by once a week is disturbing the peace? This is less traffic than any kid's birthday party generates." The customer, a friendly woman named Deanne, walked up with a smile. "Good morning, Owen." "Hi, Patricia." Patricia barely acknowledged her, but Deanne didn't seem bothered. She handed me $6. I gave her a carton of eggs and she left, the entire transaction taking less than 2 minutes. "This is ridiculous," Patricia muttered. "You're making a mockery of this community's standards." "No, Patricia. I'm keeping chickens and sharing eggs with neighbors." You're the one making it into a federal case." She started to respond, then seemed to think better of it. Instead, she turned and walked back to her car. But as she left, she called back, "This isn't over." I was starting to wonder if that was her catchphrase. A week later, I received another letter from the HOA. This one informed me that selling products from my home violated Section 14, subsection 3, which prohibited home-based businesses that generated customer traffic. They were fining me $300 and demanding I cease all egg sales immediately. I called Jennifer Santos. She laughed when I explained the situation. "Owen, they're reaching. Home-based business restrictions are meant to prevent things like running a mechanic shop or a daycare out of your house. Having a few customers stop by weekly for eggs doesn't qualify. But here's the thing. They're going to keep harassing you as long as Patricia is in charge. So what do I do?" Two options. One, you can fight every single violation notice they send, which will be expensive and exhausting. Two, you can solve the root problem, which is Patricia. The HOA board elections are coming up in 3 months. You could run for president. I hadn't even considered that. "I'm not really a leader type, Jennifer. You don't have to be. You just have to be better than Patricia. And from what you've told me, that's a pretty low bar. Think about it." I thought about it. A lot. The idea of running for HOA president felt overwhelming. I had a full-time job, a daughter to co-parent, and now an accidental egg business. Did I really want to add HOA politics to that? But I kept thinking about Linda Morrison's list of ridiculous rules, about Stephen's $500 fine for a garbage can, about Carol's wrong shade of white paint citation, about all the neighbors who had thanked me for standing up to Patricia. I talked to Emma about it during our next weekend together. She was enthusiastic. "Dad, you should totally do it. You'd be so much better than that awful Patricia woman." "It would take up a lot of time, Em. So, you're already spending time fighting with the HOA anyway. Might as well do it from a position where you can actually change things." She was right. And when Linda Morrison found out I was considering running, she became my unofficial campaign manager. "Owen, I've been waiting for someone to challenge Patricia for years. She runs unopposed because she's so mean that no one wants to deal with her attacks. But you've already survived her attacks. You're the perfect candidate." Linda organized a meeting at her house with about 15 neighbors who were interested in HOA reform. We sat in her living room, eating snacks and drinking coffee, while people shared their horror stories about Patricia's reign. The consensus was clear. Someone needed to challenge her, and I was the one who had already proven I could stand up to her bullying. But what would I actually do differently? I asked. I can't just run on a platform of "I'm not Patricia." Linda had clearly been thinking about this. "We focus on 3 things: transparency, reasonableness, and community building. Patricia runs the HOA like a dictatorship. You'd run it like an actual community organization. Open meetings, clear communication, enforcement that's focused on actual problems rather than petty power trips." Over the next few weeks, Linda and I worked on a campaign strategy. We created flyers highlighting the issues and my platform. We went door to door, talking to homeowners about their concerns and frustrations. We organized a town hall where I answered questions and listened to people's ideas. The response was overwhelmingly positive. It turned out that Patricia had alienated a significant portion of the community over her 8 years as president. People were ready for change. Patricia, predictably, did not take my candidacy well. She sent out an email blast to all HOA members claiming I was a troublemaker who disrespected community standards and was trying to turn Desert Vista Estates into a farm commune. She accused me of running an illegal business and claimed my election would lead to property values plummeting. Her tactics backfired. The email was so over the top and vitriolic that even some of her supporters found it off-putting. Several people contacted me to say they had been on the fence, but Patricia's email had convinced them to vote for me. The election was held on a Tuesday evening in early November. It was a simple vote by written ballot at the community center. Turnout was unusually high. Linda told me that typically only about 20% of homeowners bothered to vote in HOA elections, but this year it looked like we might hit 60%. Emma came with me to the community center, even though she couldn't vote. For moral support, she said. The voting took place from 6 to 8 p.m., with results to be announced at 8:30. Those 2.5 hours felt like the longest of my life. Emma and I killed time by walking around the neighborhood, looking at the houses decorated for the upcoming holidays. "Are you nervous?" Emma asked. "Terrified. Why, even if you lose, it's not like anything gets worse. You'll just be where you are now. I guess I don't want to let people down. A lot of folks are counting on this. Dad, you already won the important fight. You got to keep the chickens. Everything else is just bonus." At 8:15, we headed back to the community center. A crowd had gathered, much larger than the usual HOA meeting attendance. I saw Linda, Tom, Margaret, Stephen, Carol, and dozens of other faces I had gotten to know over the past few months. I also saw Patricia, flanked by Robert Chen and Gerald Finch, looking confident. At 8:30, David Martinez, who managed the property management company that handled HOA administrative tasks, stepped to the front of the room. "Thank you everyone for participating in tonight's election. We had an unprecedented turnout of 62% of eligible homeowners. The election results for HOA president are as follows. Patricia Hendricks received 93 votes. Owen Graham received 146 votes. Owen Graham is the new president of the Desert Vista Estates Homeowners Association." The room erupted in cheers and applause. Emma hugged me. Linda was crying happy tears. Tom shook my hand so vigorously I thought my arm might fall off. Across the room, Patricia looked like she had been slapped. She stood up abruptly and walked out without a word, Robert Chen hurrying after her. David Martinez continued, announcing the results for the other board positions. Susan Torres had been re-elected as secretary. 3 of the 4 at-large board positions had gone to reformers who had run on platforms aligned with mine. The board was going to look very different. After the celebration died down, David pulled me aside. "Owen, congratulations. I have to say, in 20 years of managing HOA accounts, I've never seen a turnaround like this. Patricia was entrenched. You did something special here." "I just kept some chickens," I said with a laugh. "You did more than that. You reminded people that an HOA is supposed to serve the community, not rule over it. That's powerful." Over the next few weeks, I transitioned into my new role. It was more work than I had anticipated. There were monthly board meetings to run, architectural review applications to process, budget issues to address, and a constant stream of emails and calls from homeowners with concerns. But it was also rewarding. One of my first acts as president was to propose a bylaw amendment to remove several of the most petty restrictions. The membership voted overwhelmingly to eliminate the paint color restrictions, allow vegetable gardens in front yards, and remove the daytime parking prohibition. We kept the rules that actually mattered for property maintenance and safety, but got rid of the ones that were just about control. I also instituted open office hours where any homeowner could come talk to me about concerns. And I made sure that violation notices were only issued for legitimate problems, not trivial infractions. My egg business continued to grow. With my new credibility as HOA president, even more neighbors became customers. I ended up getting 3 more hens to meet demand, staying under the city's 6-hen limit. I was now producing about 4 dozen eggs per week and had a customer base of 30 regular buyers. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The chickens that Patricia had tried so hard to ban were now providing fresh eggs to a significant portion of the neighborhood, including some people who had initially supported her position against me. About 3 months into my presidency, I was in my backyard collecting eggs when I heard someone clear their throat behind me. I turned to find Patricia Hendricks standing at my back gate. "Patricia, this is unexpected." She looked uncomfortable, almost embarrassed. "Mr. Graham, I wanted to ask you something." "Okay. I've been hearing a lot about your eggs, about how good they are, and I was wondering if I could purchase a dozen." I stared at her for a moment, sure I had misheard. "You want to buy eggs from me?" She nodded stiffly. "If you have any available." I should have said no. After everything she had put me through, the harassment, the fines, the legal threats, I would have been justified in turning her away. But looking at her standing there, clearly humbled and struggling to make this request, I found I couldn't do it. "I have some available, $6 a dozen." She pulled out her wallet and handed me a $10 bill. "Keep the change." I went inside, got a carton of eggs, and brought them back to her. She took them carefully, looking at them like they were precious artifacts. "They're beautiful," she said quietly. Mr. Graham, I owe you an apology, several apologies. I was wrong about the chickens, wrong about you. I let my need to control things cloud my judgment, and I made your life unnecessarily difficult. I'm sorry." It was the last thing I expected to hear from Patricia Hendricks. "Thank you. I appreciate you saying that. You're doing a good job as president, better than I did. The community seems happier. People just wanted to feel heard." She nodded. "I lost sight of that. I got so focused on maintaining standards that I forgot we're supposed to be neighbors, not enforcers." She paused. "Would you be willing to show me your chicken setup sometime? My grandson is visiting next month and he's fascinated by farm animals. I thought maybe he'd enjoy seeing real chickens." "Of course, anytime." She thanked me and left, carefully carrying her carton of eggs. I stood there for a moment, processing what had just happened. Then I called Emma to tell her about it. "Patricia Hendricks bought eggs from you. Dad, that's hilarious. It's surreal is what it is. Does this mean she's not evil anymore?" "I don't think she was ever evil, Em, just scared and controlling. Maybe losing the election helped her realize that." Over the following months, Patricia became a regular customer. She came by every 2 weeks for eggs and usually chatted for a few minutes about neighborhood happenings. She never tried to undermine my presidency or stir up trouble. In fact, she occasionally offered helpful advice about HOA procedures based on her years of experience. When her grandson visited, she brought him by to see the chickens. The boy was 7 years old and absolutely delighted by Nugget, Henrietta, Cluckles, and the 3 newer hens I had named Scrambles, Omelette, and Benedict. Patricia watched with what looked like genuine happiness as her grandson carefully held a warm egg that Benedict had just laid. "Thank you for this," Patricia said to me while her grandson was distracted by the chickens. "He's been talking about visiting the chicken farm for weeks." "It's not really a farm," I said with a smile. "No, but to a 7-year-old it might as well be." She paused. "You know, I grew up on a real farm in Iowa. We had chickens, cows, pigs, the whole thing. I loved it. When I moved to the suburbs as an adult, I think I was trying to distance myself from that rural background, make sure everyone knew I was sophisticated and proper. Seeing your chickens reminded me of what I left behind. The good parts. You could get chickens of your own now, The bylaws allow it, she laughed. Mr. Whiskers would have a heart attack. That dog is dramatic enough without adding chickens to the mix. My first year as HOA president was challenging but fulfilling. I learned to balance my job, my time with Emma, running the HOA and managing my small egg business. It helped that I had a great board supporting me. Susan Torres was efficient and organized as secretary. The other board members were reasonable people who cared about the community, rather than power. We implemented several new initiatives. A neighborhood garden where residents could grow vegetables communally. A tool-lending library so people could share equipment rather than everyone buying their own. And regular community events like movie nights and holiday parties. Desert Vista Estates started feeling less like a collection of houses governed by rules and more like an actual neighborhood. The egg business stabilized at around 50 regular customers. I couldn't grow much beyond that without more chickens than city ordinance allowed or more time than I had available. It was a nice side income, bringing in about $400 a month, but more importantly, it gave me a way to connect with neighbors. People didn't just stop by for eggs. They stopped by to chat, share news, ask advice, or just say hello. Tom Gardner started helping me maintain the coop and care for the chickens when I was busy with work or HOA duties. In exchange, he got free eggs and the pleasure of telling people he was the assistant chicken manager, which he found endlessly amusing. Linda Morrison got her own chickens, building an elaborate coop that made mine look basic by comparison. She started selling eggs too, and rather than competing, we coordinated our customer bases and covered for each other when one of us was out of town. Emma, who had started all of this with her suggestion that I get chickens, was thriving. She was doing well in school, had joined the debate team, and was already thinking about colleges. She told me that watching me stand up to the HOA and turn the situation around had inspired her to be braver about standing up for what she believed in. "You showed me that you don't have to just accept things when they're wrong," she said during one of our weekends together. "You can fight back, and sometimes you can actually win." That might have been the best outcome of the entire saga. Not the chickens, not the eggs, not even becoming HOA president, but showing my daughter that it's possible to stand up to bullies and unreasonable authority figures and create positive change. As for Patricia, she remained a customer and occasionally offered to help with HOA tasks when we were short-handed. She was never going to be my best friend, but we had reached a détente and more than that, a kind of mutual respect. She had learned to let go of control, and I had learned that even people who seem irredeemably difficult can grow and change. 2 years after the chicken saga began, I was sitting on my back porch on a Saturday morning, watching Nugget, Henrietta, Cluckles, Scrambles, Omelette, and Benedict pecking around the yard. Emma was with me, home for the weekend from her first semester at Arizona State University. We were eating omelets made with fresh eggs and vegetables from the community garden. "Dad, do you ever think about how weird it is that chickens changed your entire life?" Emma asked. I laughed. "All the time. If you hadn't suggested getting them, I'd probably still be sitting alone in this house, ordering takeout every night, barely knowing my neighbors. Instead, you're the HOA president with an egg business. A very small egg business, still. It's pretty cool. You're like a suburban chicken mogul." "I'm really not." She grinned. "Okay, but you have to admit, telling people that the HOA president who fought to keep his chickens now sells eggs to the former HOA president who tried to ban them, that's a good story." "It is a good story," I admitted. "Definitely not how I expected things to turn out. Better though, right? Much better." We sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the chickens and enjoying the cool morning air. Tom Gardner came out of his house and waved, heading over to help me with the weekend coop cleaning. A couple of customers were scheduled to stop by later for their eggs. I had an HOA meeting on Tuesday evening to prepare for. Life was busy and complicated and occasionally frustrating. But it was also full and meaningful and connected to something larger than myself. And it all started because I wanted to keep 3 chickens in my backyard and refused to back down when someone told me I couldn't. The chickens, oblivious to the drama they had caused and the changes they had sparked, continued pecking at the ground, occasionally making their soft clucking sounds. Henrietta found a particularly interesting bug and ran off with it, the other chickens chasing after her in a chaotic flapping parade. Emma laughed at the sight. "I'm so glad you didn't give them up." "Me too, Em. Me too." As the morning sun climbed higher, warming the desert air, I collected the fresh eggs from the nesting boxes and brought them inside to wash and package for my customers. Each egg was a small, perfect thing, a daily reminder that standing up for what matters, even when it seems small or silly to others, can lead to unexpected and wonderful changes. The chickens had given me more than eggs. They had given me a community, a purpose, and a story that I would be telling for the rest of my life. And somewhere, in a house 2 streets over, Patricia Hendricks was probably making breakfast with eggs from my chickens, perhaps reflecting on her own journey from antagonist to customer, from controller to community member. In the end, the HOA had complained about my chickens, just like the story said. And now they really did buy all my fresh eggs. Well, not all of them, but enough to appreciate the irony. And in a planned suburban community, where conformity had once been enforced through fines and threats, a small flock of chickens had somehow made room for a little more freedom, a little more individuality, and a lot more genuine neighborliness. That felt like a victory worth celebrating, one fresh egg at a time.